Navigating an SAP transformation? We get it. By day, we work hands-on with people like you across the globe. By night, we share what actually works. Welcome to Transformation Every Day with Alexander Greb and Johannes Langguth, where your complex transformation becomes clear, actionable, and achievable.
Absolutely. And you need some great books. I can send you some.
Yes. I'll just send. I use some enterprise architecture books. I heard there are some released.
Absolutely. And we're on, by the way. We are recording. Welcome everybody to our new podcast, which is called Transformation Every Day. I'm Alexander Greb, and joining me is my co-host Johannes Langguth. Welcome, Johannes, to our first joint episode.
Yeah, welcome back, Alexander. Oh, I should say welcome to, not welcome back. We've been talking too long already. Anyways, happy to
you're not wrong. You're not wrong. It's a return. It's a return.
It's a return. Return of the dark side, or a return of something good. You tell me.
No, people said I moved to the dark side when I went back to consulting from SAP. But to be honest, I'm not always sure what is the light side and what is the dark side of the force in that respect. But we will probably find that out.
I guess it depends on the receiving end. So in all transparency, at SAP, I'm part of the service organization as well, CSND. So we're both dark or light side. I think that it really depends on the perspective.
We move between the worlds. That's true.
Yeah. It depends.
Why are we talking? I think what we definitely should tell our guests is we have now the first episode, which means that this is for us something like an introduction, which is meant for you. We want to talk with you about first who we are. We want to win you as listeners, so which means you will spend quite considerable amount of time with us. That means you should probably know us a little bit better to judge if that's actually a good idea. And what we want to do, we want to use this as basically telling you why we are doing this kind of podcast. And I think this is the talking point, what we should start. Johannes, for you, why did you start, or why are you interested in starting this podcast now? What is the compelling event for you to say, hey, I want to be on air, I want to talk with people about digitalization, transformation, SAP in general?
I think there are so many things changing these days. I mean, I think it's a very marketing-alike term to say change is the new constant. But I think we got hit by reality over the past months and years. So I believe it's important to have some real talk about what works. What are things that made other companies successful? What are things that other people make successful? Because I think transformation is not just about a company, it's also about a person transforming. So I think it's important to speak about that, learn from that, but also think about what are things that didn't go well and learn from mistakes that other people have. So it's not about just speaking about the good. I think it's also important to speak about transformations that failed and learn from that. And I believe bringing in some real talk, some war stories. I think that's how we called it, right, Alexander? Some war stories of transformations from our end and from my end, from our customers, can add quite some value to our listeners. How about you, Alexander?
Absolutely. I fully agree with you. Well, for me, I think we are more or less at the same point again. Why I started the SAP Experts podcast 5-6 years ago. The situation that we are in as an ecosystem, customers, SAP partners, and so on, I think is very, very interesting at the moment. And because we see from the technological side, like the trap value gate is opening up. Yeah, the innovations which are happening, it's like rapid gunfire. Yeah, every year you see something completely new. Yeah, while we talked 3 years ago, maybe mainly about the cloud, now we talk about cloud plus AI and so on. And I think it's when we look, for example, in our customer landscape, we have lots of challenges there with customers trying to keep up, others still looking for their case, have problems navigating these kinds of environments. And since we are now at the brink of, we want as an ecosystem move from ECC to S4HANA, we want to move customers in that way. I think we fully agree that we have to become better and faster doing that, and better and faster leveraging innovation together with our customers. I think there are so many stories to be told in an area where communications is sometimes a little bit oversimplified. Yeah, on the one side, you have very marketing-laden messages, and I think you and me agree about that. This is, of course, from one point understandable. On the other point, it's part of the problem. But we have on the other side, of course, enough people who are not like you and me talking every day about technology or experiencing trend technology, who are working in their own area as on the customer side, and as such, of course, lacking in a certain way quite often I'm not saying the fantasy, but the entrance point to make their case for that. And I, for example, got the feedback with the SAP Experts podcast that these kind of conversations massively help them, to get the inspiration, how to approach the topic, how to get maybe stuck digitalization initiatives running again. And that's why I think the world needs a podcast like that more than ever.
Alex, this is a marketing message. So the world needs us.
Yeah, I know, but we were setting now the point. We want to justify why people should listen to us. I think some bold statements are fine.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think you covered an important point, right? This podcast is called Transformation Every Day, and it's not about bringing in a solution brief about X or Y product from SAP or any other provider. So you mentioned SAP customers, you mentioned, of course, SAP products, but I think it's important for our listeners that this is not about, hey, we tell you what does product A do and how does it compare to product B and what's the migration path. So we're not gonna zoom into specific products unless maybe conversations go this way with our guests. But it's not the intent to share a certain capability of a product. It's really to share insights on approaches, methodologies, on how customers, how people, again, coming back to the people topic, I think people is important, how people tackled transformation and technology itself, products from SAP themselves might have been a lever to achieve that, right? I think it's important for our listeners to understand that.
Absolutely, fully agree with that. And I think we have set up here something like a safe space, where we can talk freely and openly about the do's and don'ts, about what works and what does not work. And as such, I think this is something which really can bring our listeners value, getting the kind of inspirations, getting the kind of interesting points that they need to step forward. And we will cover many different topics, of course, which are relevant. We will talk about SAP, we will talk about implementation, we will talk about all the things around that which matter. And as such, I think also our setup is quite interesting in that case, because you are working for the OEM. I will not say you represent SAP.
You call it OEM. Okay. Well, it's right. Technically, it's right.
Technically, it's right. You're representing SAP. I'm representing now more the implementation, the consulting area. And as such, I think there will be really interesting conversations coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super beneficial, right, to have both perspectives. The OEM, I just keep that wording, if you like, as well as the ecosystem.
Which is, by the way, a wording so many customers and so many consultants use. And to be honest, when I was at SAP, I was not so fully aware of that. But the moment I stepped again into the consulting world, I was completely wrapped around into that wording again.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but again, that's the beauty of it. You are representing the ecosystem, and I believe transformation is nothing that happens in silo. You need partners. You need the ecosystem, to use now the official SAP wording for that. To make a transformation successful. So I think a transformation itself is never something, of course, it has to be intrinsically motivated. There, of course, are external factors driving it, but I think a crucial success factor is having a motivation and an ecosystem that's driving that. So I think there will be quite some interesting conversations coming out of that with our guests.
Definitely. But before we talk about that, let's introduce ourselves, or say it differently, Johannes. Who are you?
Who am I? Okay, that's a broad question.
Or how many are you?
And where I'm from? No.
Tell us something about you. What was your approach, your way, your journey till now? What made you what you are?
I've seen quite some stations in my life, to be honest. So I've been I worked in the industry segment, supporting a large wholesale trading company, where I actually lived in China for 3 years. Alex, that was a very interesting time. China, so. Amazing market, great food, by the way, great people, and I learned a lot. And if you ask me about my Chinese, no, it's not there anymore. I need probably some.
What a pity.
Yeah, what a pity. I need some beard, and I can use some catchphrases. I guess that's how you would call it. But I lost most of my Chinese. Yeah, and then I moved to consultancy. So I have been part of the ecosystem. I know how it feels to implement solutions, not only SAP. In all transparency, I got exposed to quite some other OEMs, to use the wording again, and moved then towards the startup world. As you know, being part of the Berlin ecosystem now, I live in Potsdam here, and obviously the startup capital of Germany was very attractive to somebody who was seeking innovation like me. So I joined a company called Deliver Hero and built up the IT there, driving a lot of transformation initiatives around the finance domain, about the customer domain. So it was a fun time. And then I moved to SAP to actually...
But that's exactly, to interrupt you here, that's exactly what I think so interesting about you, because you felt the pain in your life. You're not one of those guys
in all ways, right?
All the time. Exactly. Who worked full time in the SAP ecosystem on that side, be it at SAP itself or at consulting companies, but you've been a customer, you've been a user. Yeah. You had to justify all of that.
Yeah, and frankly, I can share some very interesting war stories. So we started with back then with a kind of it was the SFIN time where they have like Simple Finance. I don't know whether you remember that. And we went into the conversion and
the Petri dish of S4HANA.
Yeah. Yes. It was very interesting because we went into the conversion mode, and there were not so many customers that actually want to run a conversion. And we set up the system a year ago, and said, okay, we now need to go into a full-blown upgrade. And for SAP, I think SAP learned with us together about customer vendor integration, and we had quite intensive support from the SAP side to make it happen. But overall, it was successful. Yeah, but as you said correctly, I have some interesting stories as somebody who implemented, but also as somebody who had to run the system and justify the investments that go into it. Yeah. And now here Absolutely. At SAP, I'm responsible for the architecture domain with regards to the RISE with SAP promise that we gave to our customers to bring more architecture knowledge to all of the RISE customers. Well, about you, Alex? Tell me about you.
Me?
How many are you?
Than you, so... different person.
Should I call you Mr. Greb? Is that what are you implying this now because of your age?
No, not really.
Share your
Really.
wisdom.
I have become 48, by the way, a few days ago, which was shocking. again, to see the sheer number. But since I'm still getting in Bavaria, where I'm coming from, the kids, when they go to in the supermarket, they're asked, do you want a Gelbwurst? A sausage, and so on, free sausage I always tell to my butcher, as long as you offer me that, I'm feeling young and not old. But this is a different story. No, seriously. Yes, I'm a little bit older than you, I think. But I started after studies at Siemens back then. It was absolutely...
You've been with Siemens?
SAP. I've been with Siemens.
You never told me.
Siemens Business Service. Yeah, because when I started, it was we were called the Generation Practicum. It was that kind of ugly time where when you were graduating, it was very difficult to get a job. People were offered unpaid internships. Yeah.
And that was right after the dot-com bubble, right?
Exactly.
Right,
it was 2003 until 2005, this area. And this was really an quite disillusioning time for many. And I know many who worked like for 1 or 2 years without payment back then. I was happy and glad that I got a job which was actually paid after university, and which was at Siemens, where I had my first step. It was, by the way, at Siemens Business Services, which was the IT consulting arm back then, which later was acquired by Atos, which was then the time when I left. We did not do SAP back then. I was in the SCM realm. So we did optimizations for shop floor installations and so on, which I did for a few years, also after I moved to another company. And that was me when I was joining SAP in 2009 and 2010. I was not the SAP guy. I've never coded any ABAP or stuff like this, but I was more the project program manager. And so I continued to, for example, we optimized the pre-series for a major German car manufacturer, car OEM, automotive OEM, for a few years. And then I was asked in 2014 if I wanted to do something new. And I was asked by my boss back then to implement this kind of new technology for the first time. One of the first times. We were a small group back then at a major German company, and the technology was called HANA. And this was quite
the database, right?
Quite just the database first. Yeah. It was first the database, and then we moved on to also implement the first really big HANA version 15.11 with that customer. And it was quite interesting because through the years, SAP had to learn a lot because it was a new business for them too, going into the database market. So the learning curve was very steep, and you had conversations with many interesting folks and people from SAP and from the technology area, like with Bernd Leukert's weekly alignments, Hasso Plattner called several times how his baby is doing and stuff. But this worked out quite good. And for me, I was then later asked if I wanted to join and help build up the customer advisory for S4, which was then a few years later where we both met. Until I decided then to move back closer to the customer again in 2021, and I'm now at Corporate Business Solutions, or also called CBS, responsible as consulting director for the whole public cloud topic, developing transformation, and so on and so on. So quite exciting times, lots of things to do. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask a question on this. So when you implemented a database, HANA, how did customer use a database for transformation? Do you consider that a transformation, or was it more a vehicle to achieve something?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not, to be honest. For that, it was an implementation of a technology which was supposed to deliver certain value aspects. But this is really 100% bottom line. Yeah, you definitely do something different just because you have a new database which is now in memory based. But you were hoping back then, because of the accelerated speed, you could use now different capabilities.
Yeah. I think I think that's where it comes into play, right? I think the database itself is great, but it's the use case, the capabilities that you realize with the technology lever, right? To
absolutely
that determines.
And if you remember back the communications, it was all about speed. Now you're faster and so on. And now you can make these kinds of postings within a blink of an eye and so on. Yeah. But to be honest, I fully agree, because at that time already it became clear that speed for speed's sake is practically worthless if you still continue to do the same things like you did before. But to be honest, this is at that point where my personal mission started in that way, because like we often discussed, we are developing and implementing technology. Yeah, and the question is still for what? In the end, it's just a tool. Yeah, it's an instrument, and you have to play it. You have to work with that. And there is this famous example about moving from a hammer to an electric drill. If you still use the electric drill to hammer nails into a board, the whole initiative was for nothing. And that's why my mission and yours, your mission is similar. Is to really empower users to do things they were not able to do before. And this is also what we want to achieve with this podcast.
Yeah, fully agree. I mean, using the driller as a hammer will most probably destroy the driller. That's, I think, fair to say as well, right?
Absolutely. What would Johannes Langguth have become if you would not have done that SAP stuff and that technology stuff?
Sounds strange, but I would have most probably stayed at university. I like university, work and life.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I always thought about doing my PhD. So I would have most probably stayed at the university and went into an academic career. If not, this would have, I like the theory around it as well. I think there are great things that you can learn from academics that really can create quite some impact. So I would most probably not work in the SAP space, but rather in the academic world and look into papers. Yes. So I studied quantitative finance. So doing some statistic stuff. I don't want to put too much statistic or econometric wording in here, because otherwise our listeners might shut off. But frankly, I would most probably stay in that space. Computational finance, stuff like that. It's very interesting. I don't use much of it these days, to be honest. But it's I would have most probably stayed there and did some equations on the whiteboard. How about you, Alex?
To be honest, to resonate on that, I hear that you definitely enjoyed your time at university. To be honest, I was the absolute different, the opposite of that. I absolutely did not enjoy it. I have to be very.
Why is that? How can you not enjoy it?
It was fun in the beginning. Yeah, when you were enjoying this kind of freedom and so on, and those people, and it was not like school. It was much more open. But the problem for me started when I financed my studies myself. So I always had jobs. I did some odd jobs. For the most time I worked as a long distance truck driver.
Long distance?
Went to Algeria and for the big rigs. I went to Algeria and Israel and Norway and Moldavia, sorry, that's the correct pronunciation. So it was quite interesting. So this was for the financial baseline. And then, of course, I had my jobs. I worked in the new economy back then. And there it started for me that I said, like, I'm not really sure if I'm so fully convinced about that theoretical stuff, because I firsthand experienced that kind of excitement, of course, we all had with that Internet 1.0 back then, when these kind of new ideas that were spreading, and it was cool and so on, because these people there, I knew offices like at NCR and Siemens from the 80s, from where my father worked. But these were different. This was hip and young and juvenile and childish in some points. Yeah, but then you found out, because I was back then wondering, like, but how do we earn money? Where does the money come from? And nobody could tell me. And I thought like, okay, maybe it's just me that I'm stupid and I don't get it. But then I realized, when things went south quite quickly after a few months, that probably there's actually an issue there. And so the company I was working there for as a student went, of course, bankrupt, like so many back then. And this, of course, had a quite impact about me, like thinking critically about statements, about business models, about approaches. And I tried to transport that back to university into the conversations we had there with professors and so on. But then I realized that they were not really interested in that. Nobody cared, because we still were forced to write in exams about how great everything is and what kind of possibilities there are. Why I firsthand realized, no, it's not that easy. It's not that black and white. There's a lot of gray in there. And the non-existing possibility to really discuss that, then, to be honest, was killing my joy quite tremendously. I'm not saying this is a problem of university itself. I work together now with universities, with Hochschule München, for example, as a guest lecturer there. They are doing great stuff there, absolutely. And in Stanford, what they teach there is absolutely awesome. Yeah, I would have loved to be there. But my personal time at university was like, okay, get your paper and get out. Yeah, get into working life, get into the reality, to call it like that.
Yeah, I think there are, of course, I think that's a very individual problem that some of these established professors have. But I think recent academic research, I think it's very interesting how it changed. Of course, you still have to put a solid theoretical fundament around things. But if I look, for example, what Henley School does these days about the studies regarding enterprise architecture, where you can see, okay, how are things evolving? I think there are many different universities that they go into kind of a, I don't want to call it a pragmatic, but rather a practically oriented approach. Say they speak
Absolutely.
to customers or companies. They do research in the field. So it's not so much about just putting a theory together. I think, of course, that's part of the academic life. But I think if you do academics right, you need to have a touch of reality and make that realize in kind of a field study environment, to be honest.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that, because we will have an episode coming up featuring Professor Dr. Alexander Zeyer, who is the father of HANA, and professor at I think he was for years guest professor at the MIT, and now Professor Magdeburg, and heavily researching in the AI sector. And you are absolutely right. It's like jobs. Yeah, how do you interpret your profession? Be it as a scientific person, be it as a consultant, being as a manager, massively matters. And that's definitely the important thing in that area. Concerning the purpose of this podcast, what is your personal mission in that way, that you say, like, there are certain myths probably you want to bust by that, or certain things you want companies to stop doing immediately or to start doing immediately?
So, I mean, I think you know that I'm very passionate about architecture itself. So also a little bit the methodology. I think that comes back from my interest in academics. And something that I would like to achieve is that, companies start interpreting architecture in a way how it is really intended to be. It's not a technology domain, actually. It's actually a strategy business domain that needs to be strengthened. And I think it's a muscle that is existing in a lot of companies. But I think we need to bring across a message to train that muscle, to establish architecture practices in companies that are worthwhile to call it an architecture practice, and not just, infrastructure. And I think that's a core thing that I would like to achieve, is to demystify the word architecture as a database, infrastructure savvy topic, but rather establish it as a strategic domain on a C-level agenda, because that's where it needs to be. There are so many things changing, and there is somebody who has to, I keep saying an architect is somebody who creates that digital twin of a company, and you need somebody to understand what are the dependencies of that digital twin if you want to lift an arm, if you want to walk. And I think that's where we need to, educate our listeners and learn from our guests what they think, how that digital twin could look like.
Absolutely. Fully agree. Same here. Yeah. Because, I see it since years that digitalization initiatives, and under this umbrella, I put all S/4HANA implementations, RISE implementations, and so on, are still done and seen too much as a technical exercise, are seen as, that's what the IT should do. Yeah, and I'm business. I'm not really involved in that. And this is a 1 in a 10-year chance, which is wasted every time exactly this happens. Because I'm convinced that what we are doing now with all the technology parts in there, with AI, with next-gen capabilities in there, has to be treated as a business topic. It is something where you first really should talk about your strategy. What are you up to? What are the challenges that you are facing as a enterprise, as an organization? Then be aware what are the capabilities you need to achieve that. And then based on this kind of capability discussion and this kind of capability awareness, discuss what kind of architecture is able to deliver the features and functions and capabilities to make that happen.
Fully.
And this discussion, of course, is happening before that, and it needs guidance in a phase where quite often the SAP customer is full by himself. And that's, I think, where we should carry this discussion more and more. Yeah, that this is a business topic. This is a strategic investment that you're doing, not a cost case. And if we raise awareness with our podcast for that, to do that, and by that enable customers to leverage much more value than they have in the past, then I think our mission would be accomplished.
We don't want to spoil too much, right? But I think there's quite a great lineup that we could
absolutely
we can rely on. And it's not all about
absolutely.
SAP.
And no, definitely not. But as you see, our setup is very interesting. You come from different perspectives than me. Everybody brings his stuff with him, and his passion and his past. And I think this is going to be really interesting. When I would ask you, what are the topics, let's say the technological topics, that excite you more? If you would have 2 of them, what would they be?
Only 2 technology topics?
Just 2, for time's sake.
I mean, I have to say AI, right? Because that's the hype everybody looks at, and I think there are fantastic things coming out of it. Of course, it's still the impact has to be shown substantially in the long run. But I experiment myself with AI toolings. And it's very interesting what you can get out of it. And I think that's one of the core topics that will drive the next centuries, in my opinion. So that's one of the topics I would pick. And that also, by the way, relates back to one of the mission that we spoke about earlier. I think we as architects need to shift away from a descriptive architecture towards kind of an intent-based architecture to anticipate AI cases and stuff like that. I think we should speak about that in one of the episodes, because I think we need to change our way, how we perform architecture activities away from the classic, I think it used to be called instant economy, then experience economy. I think now we've reached the era of the intent-based economy, and that means that we as architects need to do things a little bit different here. So definitely pick AI. And from a technology standpoint, it's a hardware thing, but I would use my cell phone because I'm a cell phone addict, to be honest. I have my cell phone with me every day. So all the stuff that I need to do is on my cell phone. I keep getting asked how I walk the stairs when, writing emails and stuff like that. So I definitely need my cell phone. Otherwise, I will have a big problem. How about you, Alex? Are you a cell phone addict yourself?
At least, and this is, by the way, something that really hurt me when my daughter said, like, a year ago to me, Dad, can you survive without your mobile phone? Yeah, which is like, oh, am I now a bad parent? When my daughter says that to me and she realizes things that I do not realize. So I try to tone that down, to be honest, with having not that gadget all the time around with me. But we cannot live without it anymore. I fully agree with you.
Alex, we need to do a pilot. We need to do a pilot. We need to record an episode on the cell phone. I don't know whether it's going to work, though, but just to have the proof point that cell phones are capable of doing everything. Sorry.
Absolutely. No worries. No, but concerning the things which I'm at the moment, I'm completely fascinated about are, yes, also AI. I know the word AI is awful at the moment because certain people now start to get AI fatigue. Yeah, since we are now again, and this remembers me. I remember it's the same like those 20 years ago or 25 years ago doing the .com base, why even SAP back then called itself suddenly for a few years mysub.com. Now is everything .ai. Yeah, and we are again in the exact same craze, I think, in the moment where we are now with a two in an ocean of possibilities. Of course, we are, in my opinion, not aware at all what we can do with that and what that means. But of course, we try to find it out. So there are lots of ideas happening, some of them great, some of them stupid. But I think concerning AI, we are now, and I would call it now in an AI 1.0. Yeah, similar like Web 1.0, yeah, where we are now trying to try out certain things. But to be honest, in my opinion, they are not really AI's driven what we are doing, because we add AI to legacy functionalities and legacy processes most of the times now. I have not seen, to be honest, something which is fully AI powered, because it would mean to completely leave away certain things, functionalities, processes, and let AI do its thing in that area. So I think we are just in the beginning there, but I'm really looking forward to what comes up. And how our business, how our society will change by this. I'm maybe a little bit careful with certain things. It's not that I say like, oh, AI will mean the end of all, but definitely it will be something exciting, interesting what will come up.
Yeah, I mean, with regards to AI, I think what you are describing is if people use AI as yet another technology feature to increase efficiency. So AI-driven efficiency is obviously not a game changer, but AI-driven transformation can be a game changer. So, but that implies that the narrative that you use to implement your AI scenario is driven out of a business idea and not out of an efficiency input-output optimization problem.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's manageable when you are able to bring these topics to the business. If you pull it out of the IT into the business, because the IT departments in many areas, they are cost centers. Yeah, they are efficiency driven, because a CIO in many cases is measured to deliver a certain service for the least possible amount of budget. And as such, IT, it's not 100% always that case, but in many areas it's that case. And as such, IT-driven initiatives are, like you said, are all about improving efficiency, but they're not really about improving effectiveness. And this kind of raising the top line, what you're talking about, I think it's so important in any cases, even without AI, without AI, to even when you implement S/4HANA, for example, not to look in how can I do the things I did all the time, quicker, faster, cheaper, but what kind of new things am I able to do and what kind of new businesses am I able to embrace by implementing and using this kind of new technology?
Yeah, but I mean that relates back to how we need to interact as IT to the business. And there's a book that I recently read. It has nothing to do though with SAP. It's called Predictably Irrational. Very interesting. It's about how it's. I think it's written by a behavioral scientist, if I remember correctly. I can't recall the name. Dan something. Anyways. And it was about how can you get people adopting something? How can you get people buying something? And it's very, very interesting. I think there are a lot of great learnings out of that book, how you could, use behavioral science to steer that interaction between a business and IT. It's, I think, oftentimes also fear-driven because business units, and that, by the way, is one of the paradigms of that book, it's oftentimes that there is the fear that if I rely too much on another a department, that kind of creates dependencies, and by that fear comes up and resistance comes up. That's why I see, by the way, a lot of so-called business ITs evolving because I think it's all about the span of control that business units want to have. I think that's also one episode that we should talk about that. How do you really steer the interaction between a business and IT? But do you have a book, Alex, that you think is worthwhile mentioning here that influenced you? And Tom, don't tell me it's your logistics book that you just recently published. Okay.
No. It's not my book. It's a different book. I will show it to you. But to reply to what you say, because I think this is a hugely interesting point. One of the things which changed massively in the last 4 to 5 years is that IT is not the only channel for business anymore to consume technology. With cloud and being able to subscribe to something and get a service here and there and so on, there has been an emancipation of business from IT in a certain area. And IT tried to catch up. And in many cases struggling to still get hold and do their job in governing what's actually happened. And this is something where especially architecture comes heavily into place, because this is then formulating the guardrails where this can happen, because sometimes it should and sometimes it should not.
Yeah, I think it really also depends a bit on the how the company is run as a whole. I know great companies where basically business and IT are one unit because IT itself is a full-blown differentiator and not just an enabler or a commodity product. So I believe there are great examples, but you are right. There are the entry barriers to consume technology, and I think that should be the right wording that we need to use. Consumption of technology has dramatically changed over the past years, indeed.
Absolutely. And to answer your question with the book, it's this one here.
You prepared
it's Pivot to the Future. Yeah, no, it's just grab over there in my other bookshelf, which is on the right side. But it's Pivot to the Future by Omar Abush. I think it's now something like 6 or 7 years old, and it's really, really interesting because it's all about discovering value and creating growth in a disrupted world. It's about all these kinds of mechanisms and mechanics which happen. Also, what you were saying in a behavior dimension, when you are all about digesting new possibilities in technology. And I highly recommend it to everybody. Read it because it shows the laws of change in that area and how we can, in the best way, act to, on the one hand, get the most out of it, but on the other hand, also do not leave anybody behind. Yeah, because that's one of the big, of course, risks that you cover and that you face when you are moving into that direction.
Yeah, cool. I think you need to send it over or hand it over to me when we meet next time. I don't have it yet.
Definitely, we will do that. Definitely. Good. Thank you very much. I think this is our first episode. I think our listeners will have something of an impression now, what they can expect and whom they can expect. And I hope so. This is going to be very interesting. We definitely have the promise that this is not something of a one-time thing, where some people try now to do some podcasts and then lose interest and you will hear nothing from them anymore.
We have it scheduled, Alex. We have it scheduled.
We have it scheduled and it's serious.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's serious. And our ambition is huge to be nothing less than the to-go-to SAP podcast globally. So we'll measure ourselves on that.
And non-SAP.
But Johannes,
Joe Rogan would comment.
And non-SAP, by the way. Exactly. But Johannes, it's great to have you on board and great to embark with you on the journey.
Likewise.
And I hope many listeners will feel the same and join us on that.
Likewise, I can only echo that what you said, Alex. I look forward to great conversations and great learnings for us, but also for our listeners.
Perfect. See you next time.
See you next time.